All right, so here we have the angle, and we know the angle is going to equal half of the big arc minus the little arc. And here we're told that the little arc is 92 degrees. So the measure of angle 1 is going to equal half of the big arc minus the little arc. Now, the trick here is we know the little arc is 92, but they don't give us the big arc. Okay, so think if you can to try and come up with a way that you could find that big arc. Okay, looking at the picture, looking at what I have, notice how the big arc and the little arc combine to create the whole circle, meaning that that big arc is going to be 360, which is the whole circle, minus 92. So that big arc ends up being 268. So we take half of the big arc minus the little arc. So the measure of angle 1 is half of 268 minus 92, which is 176. And then we take half of that and get our answer of 88. Okay. Now this time we're finding the value of x. Again, we've got the angle outside the circle. This time we're given the angle, and we're given information about our big arc and our little arc, but we're not actually given their measures. So we're given it in terms of x's. So remember that the angle, which in this case is 12, is going to equal half of the big arc minus the little arc. And so I know the big arc is equal to 4x minus 5. And I know the little arc is equal to 2x plus 3. All right, now here's where we want to be careful on this question. Notice how I put the two, I have the big parentheses because I need to take half of that whole thing. But then when I went ahead and I plugged in the 4x minus 5 and the 2x plus 3, I put those in parentheses as well. The big reason here is because we're subtracting, and when we subtract 2x plus 3, we need to make sure that we subtract the 2x and the 3. So what you need to do here is we basically change the minus into a plus a negative. So subtracting is the same thing as adding a negative. And if I make this a negative, so I'm going to go ahead and take a negative and distribute it, it's going to make that a negative 2x and a negative 3. So then, when I combine my like terms, I would have 4x and minus 2x, which is 2x, and negative 5 minus 3, which is negative 8. All right, then I need to distribute that half. You could distribute before you combine like terms, but you're more likely to, in this case, you would have several decimals that you'd have to deal with. And then this way you just have less distributing because you only have 2 terms instead of 4 terms. So we have 12 equals 1x minus 4. So then plus 4, you get x equals 16. Now, really quickly, I do want to just show you a second option from this point here. I do sometimes have students who, instead of wanting to distribute the 1/2, they want to times, instead of having the 1/2 on the right side, they want to get rid of that and make it 2 times 12. And so then instead of taking half of 2x minus 8, you're doubling the 12, and then the 2x minus 8 just stays as 2x minus 8. So instead of taking half of the right side, You're doubling the left side. And that is perfectly acceptable. You get 24 equals 2x minus 8. Oops, sorry. That's not a very good 8. And then add 8. 24 plus 8 is 32. But then you'll notice when you divide by 2, you still get 16. So just an alternate way. Now in this particular case, doing it this way is nicer because you don't have decimals to deal with. However, had these been an odd number, you would have had decimals to deal with, and that's where that blue option is a nice option to have. Again, you don't have to, it's just an option. All right. So lastly, we just have a couple various types of examples of those same 3 types of problems. So this, if you want to, you can go ahead and try them on your own. This would be a good time to pause, try them, and then unpause, check yourself, and continue on through there. So try some of those practices by yourself. Alright, so this first one we're asked for the angle. The vertex is on the circle, so the angle is half the arc. So the measure of angle 1 would be half of 130, which would give you 65. Alright, next one. The measure of the arc is what we're asked for, and we're given the angle. Again, the vertex is on the circle, so the measure of the angle, which is 125, is half of the arc. So half of the measure of arc KJL. And so that's the same thing as saying the angle times 2, and if you times 125 times 2, you get 250. So that's the measure of KJL, or KJL. All right, and I did some of these last examples in your notes or on different slides. When I went and changed it to this format so that I could actually write with it, I did condense and put some of them on the same slide. So just be aware of that. Forgot to mention that before I started this slide. All right, again, these two have vertices, vertex on the circle. So here we're looking for the angle. So the angle is half the arc. The measure of the angle 1 would be 105. Here we're given the angle. We're looking for the arc, so we're going to take the measure of arc TSR is going to be 98 times 2, which is 196. Whoops. Oh, sorry. Okay. Sorry, I thought I hit the wrong button, and then I ended up hitting the wrong button because I tried to fix it. All right. This time we have the vertex on or in the circle, inside the circle. So this is the one where we're going to have to do the average. Now, looking here, I'm looking for this arc right here. And in order to find this arc, especially because I have this arc, I need to know this angle and this angle. Again, these angles would be the same because they're vertical angles, but I'm not given that. So in this case, I need to first find that. Fortunately, we have this angle over here, and you can see that these two angles form a linear pair, that straight line. So 180 degrees, this angle has to be 78. So we know that the angle, which is 78, is equal to half of y plus 95. Okay, and this, again, you have two options, as we discussed before. You can go ahead and distribute the 1/2 through. Then you're going to have some decimals to deal with, which isn't a big deal. Decimals are not evil. I know we don't always like them, but it is okay. You can get decimals. If you want to avoid them, what you could do is instead of taking half of the right side, you could double the left side. So if you take 78 times 2, you get 156. And then instead of so you don't no longer have the half because you doubled the other side. That's y plus 95. And then subtract 95 minus 95. And you get y equals 61. If you would have distributed, you would have gotten 78 equals, you can write it as 1/2 y or 0.5 y. I think we're going to have to divide, so I think sometimes it's easier to divide when it's a decimal than to have to divide with fractions. But that's a personal preference for you guys, whatever you prefer. Then half of 95 is 47.5. Then subtract 47.5. 78 minus 47.5 is 30.5. All right, and if you're typing it into your calculator, it's definitely better to do it as a decimal than as a fraction, because if you were to type, and it varies depending on the calculator, but if you were to type dividing by 1/2 into your calculator, most calculators you would need to put a parentheses around the 1/2, because instead of dividing by 1/2, it would divide by 1 and then divide by 2. Instead of taking the 1/2 and dividing by that whole thing. So it's easier to type it in as just 0.5 when you're typing it into your calculator, and you get 61 either way. If you left it as a fraction, the other option is you'd be dividing by 1/2, and then we just have to remember that dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal. So dividing by 1/2 is the same as multiplying by 2/1. So just take 30.5 times 2, same results. Okay, so all those are different options for how you could do that problem. Okay, almost done. Last one. So here the vertex is out of the circle. So that's where we take, where the angle is half of the big arc minus the little arc. So I have the angle, that's 30. And the angle is half of the big arc. And again, remember when we say big arc and little arc, we're only talking about the two arcs that are actually inside the angle. So the big arc is A, the little arc is 44. And again, we have the option of timesing the left side by 2 instead of timesing by 1/2 on the right side. Or you can just distribute. So if you distribute that, you get 30 equals 0.5a minus 22. Then you have to add 22. That's 52 times 0.5a, divide by 0.5, and you get 104 equals your A. Other option, again, just like we've been doing, instead of timesing the right side by 1/2, you could double the left side times the other side by 2. That's going to give you 60 equals A minus 44. Add 44, and as you see, just like we've been saying, you still get the same answer. Alright, so that's it for this first lesson. If you guys have any questions, again, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll do my best to answer them as quickly as I can. Alright, thank you.